Three, two, one. Let it do its thing. Okay. All right, we are back. What is going on, Colts Nation? And welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another one. Derek, it is about time, my friend. Free agency, legal tampering, all that stuff. Little over a week away here by the time this episode drops. So, what is going on, everybody? We are finally back. Enough of the speculation, enough of the conversations. It's now time, Derek, almost for us to get some answers in the NFL free agency circle. And so, with that being said, Derek, I thought as we've done the last number of years before free agency, I thought it could be a great thing that we could start talking about some perceived positions of need for the Colts. I think we've identified 4 different positions that we would say we'd like to see the Colts address in some fashion this offseason, our top 4, if you will. We're going to talk about each and every one of them, talk about some potential free agents who are going to be available the Colts could consider signing. And so, really, Derek, there's one offensive position here in free agency that we feel like the Colts potentially need to seriously dip into or consider dipping into. And then 3 defensive ones as well. And so the position obviously is a wide receiver position. Now, Derek, before we dive into some of the guys who are available, I will say this. Obviously, Michael Pittman Jr. set to become a free agent unless the Colts and him can, come to a long-term deal, which we fully expect them to. If not, franchise tag. We don't expect Michael Pittman Jr. to go anywhere. The Bengals will be franchise tagging T. Higgins and Mike Evans from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that will be taking some of the top options right there, right away off the board. But Derek, there are still a ton of options here in free agency. While there may not be a T. Higgins or Michael Pittman, there are still some guys here, Derek, that seriously could help the Colts out in some big ways. Let's dive right into some of these guys that we feel like could be available here for the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, we are recording this before the combine. So some of these guys get tagged or whatever, re-signed, then obviously cross them off the list. But these are some guys, as of right now, these are some guys who are available currently and have not reached any sort of agreement with their former teams, or also just guys that aren't going to be franchised and probably aren't going to be re-signed by their teams. And so, Derek, when I was looking at some of the guys that are going to become available, I think the first one that you got to point to is actually a guy that played on a division rival last year who also eclipsed 1,000 yards or a hair over 1,000 yards. That's Calvin Ridley, and 29 years old. Obviously, Derek, he missed some time with the whole gambling thing. But Derek, this is a guy that showed even when Jacksonville was struggling, he still was their number 1 wide receiver. And it's kind of a weird situation for the Jaguars where if they do extend, Calvin Ridley, they owe the Atlanta Falcons their 2nd round pick, which is crazy. That's just kind of a weird kind of thing. But, so there is uncertainty about will a guy like Calvin Ridley re-sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars here in 2024. And Derek, he's a little bit of a different type of wide receiver, I feel like, than what the Colts maybe have right now on their roster. So I know he's still kind of, not the youngest guy here on the list, but Derek, he's still a guy that has shown when he's on the field, he can be very productive. What would your thoughts be? Because, obviously Calvin Ridley barely made anything in 2023. What would your thoughts be on if Calvin Ridley does not stay with Jacksonville, bringing him to Indianapolis?
Definitely would be an interesting tidbit here. Last year, Calvin Ridley definitely had a case of the drops. So what you're going to get in Calvin Ridley is a guy who, he's going to make a lot of big plays, but at the same time, he's also going to make some plays that make you just go, wow, dude, like what the heck? What are you doing here? It seems like Indianapolis is trying to get away from the drop problem, right? And it just seems like this is kind of one of those guys where this doesn't really apply. But you can't deny what Calvin Ridley definitely is. A guy that's going to be 30 years old going into this year. Again, another one of those aging wide receivers, but he showed you, this year that he's still got plenty in the tank. This is a guy that, yes, like you said, got suspended for a bogus bet thing for a whole year by the NFL. Ended up, finishing with 76 catches for over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. So, this is definitely a guy that is still got a lot in him among free agent wide receivers. Actually has the second most touchdowns of any wide receiver on the free agent market this year. So, Calvin Ridley's got a lot left in him, man. And I would not hate the idea of that. Like you said, it's gonna cost a pretty penny though. He's gonna cost a pretty penny. I could imagine anywhere from 15 to $19 million, somewhere in that mid to high teens range when it comes to money wise. So, it just all depends on what Jacksonville is going to do. I know for a fact they're not franchise tagging him. You can't
Yeah.
franchise tag him. There's no way they're going to use their franchise tag on Calvin Ridley and hope that they can get a deal done with Josh Allen. It's just not going to happen. So, I mean, they either get a deal done with Calvin Ridley or Ridley's going to one of the highest bidders. And, maybe that's something he'd entertain. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you're right in the fact that, 7 drops, obviously that's not good. You can't have that. But again, he like you said, the touchdowns are there, the production's there. So that's definitely a good thing. And he was durable. He played in all 17 games. So that's definitely would be a thing positively in his favor. But Derek, I think the one guy, and I think honestly my favorite potential target for the Colts who fits the Colts timeline, I think, is a guy like Gabe Davis. I mean, we already know, Derek, what he's been able to do in Buffalo his first couple of years. I mean, he's going to be 25 years old when the season comes this year. So, I mean, you look at him, Derek, and I know some people say he's a product of Josh Allen and that offense and what they did. But, Derek, I mean, the last couple of years, Gabe Davis has been over 700 yards receiving as that second option, in Buffalo. And so you just wonder if you give him an opportunity here, it'd be 25. So you have him and Pittman right in their mid 20s. Could Gabe Davis be a nice wide receiver 2 option for the Indianapolis Colts? It definitely seems like he is kind of done in Buffalo, at least from what he had posted, kind of a long winded message about thank you to everything. So that would insinuate potentially that he is leaving Buffalo. But if he does become available, Derek, I think for timeline's sake, because the other guys we looked at, pushing 30 or a little bit over 30, but Gabe Davis is right there hitting his prime, Derek. What are your thoughts on him?
That's a very interesting one because for Gabe Davis, especially these last 2 years, like you said, these last 2 years with Buffalo, when Buffalo's offense pretty much exploded, Gabe Davis has been one of the biggest reasons as to why. Like you said, 40 plus catches, 48 catches in 2022, 45 catches in 2023. Only missed, what was it, two games in that stretch, and had 750 plus yards in each of those seasons. He's a guy that averages over 16 yards a catch. He had 7 touchdowns each of the last few seasons. This is like what we kind of would hope that Alec Pierce would become, right? Like that's sort of what Gabe Davis is. Now, I would argue Gabe Davis is a slightly better route runner than Alec Pierce. I wouldn't say he's a excellingly better route runner, but Gabe Davis is definitely a better route runner at the moment than Alec Pierce. And like you said, Gabe Davis is only about to turn 25 years old. He's young. He's young. He's got a lot more in him still. And this is a guy that has been catching passes from Josh Allen for a living for the last couple of years. He's had a lot of big plays and a lot of big moments. And while, albeit, like you said, playing second fiddle to Stephon Diggs over the last 4 years. So it definitely is interesting of a pick if you think that Gabe Davis is going to be excelling more than what a Alec Pierce would eventually get to. Because, like I said, I truly believe that Indianapolis thinks Alec Pierce is going to become what Gabe Davis is if you give him the quarterback that's actually able to throw him the football down the field. Now, will he? I don't know. But I will admit, I don't think it'd be a terrible opportunity there for Indy. And like we said before, Gabe Davis is a guy you don't have to really you don't have to break the bank on him. You don't have to break the bank on him. His market value right now is right in between 13 and 14 million dollars. So, I mean, that's not that crazy for a guy that can be your bona fide number 2 wide receiver for the long haul. If you gave him a long-term contract, you could give him a 3-year contract or 4-year contract worth 50 to 60 million dollars. I mean, that's definitely something that Indy could provide for Gabe Davis. It's all just a matter of whether or not you think Gabe Davis was a product of Josh Allen, or if you think that Gabe Davis can do that anywhere. I mean, it
Right.
seems logical given the fact that you're going from one strong-armed quarterback who makes a lot of errant throws to another strong-armed quarterback who's just starting to find his way. It doesn't really seem like as if there's much of a differential here in the play style. I would argue that the offensive game flow might be a little different for Gabe Davis with Shane Steichen, and I don't know. I don't know if that fits him or not. And I don't know what happens with Alec Pierce in that time span as well. So, listen, I would be all for it if you could get him for a good deal because he is 25 years old and he showed you he can get you nearly 1,000 yards receiving as a number 2 option. I think that would be a great opportunity for Indy if they're looking to solidify that wide receiver room.
Yeah, and one thing that we talked about with Chris Ballard, like he said he wants more explosion on the offense, right? That's one thing he wanted to add this offseason. Well, I tell you what, Derek, out of the 4 guys we've talked about already, or I guess 3 guys we've talked about, Michael Pittman included, I suppose, in there as well. Gabe Davis has the most yards per reception over all of those guys. Derek, he's averaged 16.6 yards per reception in 2023. And so you're right. He is a big play waiting to happen. And, I kind of look at that and I say, hey, Anthony Richardson, we know he can throw the deep ball. So could that be a really, really good find there and a really good fit for Indianapolis, for Shane Steichen, who we know traditionally his offenses, Derek, they've been about those explosive plays. So just adding another guy, supporting your young quarterback, and really kind of scratching off potentially one of those top draft needs as well. Would that make a lot of sense there for Indianapolis? But again, the question is, number one, the money, which we'll see on that. Being a little younger, you wonder, will he command more than maybe his market value? And also, is he a product of Josh Allen and that offense? I guess we'll have to find out, but I think it could be a solid option here for Indianapolis potentially. Derek, there's a couple other guys we could talk about here. I mean, really beyond these guys we talked about, Gabe Davis just a couple hundred yards here, like 260 yards from 1,000 yards. Then there's a couple other guys, Derek, like a Tyler Boyd, Curtis Samuel, Josh Reynolds, Hollywood Brown, Noah Brown, some of those guys. And then you have other guys like Darnell Mooney. So there's just a bunch of guys that are kind of just haven't done a whole lot, to be honest with you, in 2023. There's some guys like Hollywood Brown, who's interesting because he's going to be 27 years old. We know he kind of has that big playability if given the chance. But again, he hasn't lived up to that draft type, Derek. So you wonder with a guy like Hollywood Brown, and also the fact that I feel like he always has kind of missed a couple games per season. Is that kind of worth a flyer? And then obviously Noah Brown, what he did with CJ Stroud last year when given the opportunity, does he need it? If he gets a bigger role, could he even pick up where he left off? Because this is a dude, Derek, that had over 200 yards receiving in the game last year. Now, is that CJ Stroud? Is that Noah Brown? We'll see. But guys like that, Derek, any of these guys that I kind of mentioned or any other guys that you've kind of seen that could be more of like the veteran addition, but doesn't necessarily cross off the need for wide receiver, say in the draft or anywhere else.
Yep. I mean, it's definitely going to be fun. I think one other player that I would go out of my way to maybe say could be another guy that I would love if Indianapolis wanted to try to take a chance on for a wide receiver is Rashid Shaheed. I don't know if that's going to end up being a thing for them or not, but another young wide receiver who only played in these last 2 seasons, so he kind of started off slow, but I mean, his production doubled from 2022 to 2023, and I mean, it went from, and he only played in 3 more games. So, this was a situation for Shaheed who, only played in 15 games, started in only 7, and ended up with 46 catches for 719 yards. He was a top 15 wide receiver in free agency right now in overall yards per reception. On average, he averages 16 and a half throughout his career so far. So again, another one of those guys that makes a lot of plays and had 5 touchdowns last year. So another guy that, I could definitely see looking to try to make a splash this free agency as well. I mean, I wouldn't mind if Indianapolis wanted to go that route.
I know he is not an unrestricted free agent. I know he has like a
Right.
different kind of tag a little bit. He's a exclusive restricted free agent. So it's a little
Right.
bit different when it comes to that for a guy like that. So basically, those guys are players with fewer than 3 accrued seasons, but are not under contract for the following season. So I guess he would be available there. That's just kind of a unique, weird sort of thing there for Shaheed. But you're right. I mean, we saw what he did against the Colts, Derek. So would not mind kind of that jitterbug type of guy, which I still think the Colts could use. As much as we love Josh Downs, I mean, that would make a lot of sense. But Derek, I think there's a lot of solid options here. I know some people, like I just actually posted something on Twitter, and a lot of people are saying for Gabe Davis, he's way too inconsistent. So that could be a factor as well in that. I guess we'll see on that. But guys, these are some of the free agents that, are some of the top guys potentially statistically from last year the Colts could be interested in. I don't know if you guys would have any interest in any of these players for the Colts if you wanted to make more of a bigger splash, or if you'd rather than maybe sign more of a veteran and still address it in the draft. But let us know, guys, your overall thoughts here for the Indianapolis Colts when it comes to free agency and the wide receivers that could potentially become available. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.